if anyone else was going to do this high demand low enroll scholarship, I have an extra one I printed off right here if you want to fill it out right now and hand it to her.
Thank you.
Run.
Alright, so is anybody having problems getting the textbook? You want me to make a poll? I think it's more having issues with stuff being so I think it's more you having problems with textbooks and getting it from if it's back ordered. Have y'all, have I heard y'all say that on anyone?
Miss Christensen, I talked to the bookstore today. They said it is on back order and they don't know when they're gonna get it. But they recommended me get the online textbook. So that's what I'm gonna do.
Okay. How about anybody else? If you do, just tell me yes, so I can kind of look into it. So you don't have to see everybody else's. I'm just gonna get it turned off. So yeah, that would definitely help. I didn't scan it in the other night, so if anybody, I won't start doing the review questions for 3. I'm going to cover the chapter, but I won't do the review questions before next Wednesday. So if you still need it, then just make sure to shoot me an email so that I'll see it in my email. All right, so let's kind of get started. This one's a pretty good chapter. I'm trying to get through these ones about terminology and let us start, actually doing some estimates. So the book breaks them down into, they actually break the chapters down to sections. Oh, sorry, that one, even though he'll be sitting right here, and he'll probably come back. Make sure we're all. They break them down into sections. So, like chapters 1 through section 1 is construction management, and that goes through, I think, about chapter 3. So then section 2 is the actual estimating, where we start getting into getting some prices and things like that. So I'm trying to get us through section 3, terminology, and then we can move on. All right. So section 3 is going to be talking about the delivery method. So when we do the delivery method, we're going to look at risks that are involved based on construction projects. We're going to distinguish most common project delivery methods, and then we're going to look at the different contracting methods, and then decide what's the appropriate delivery method or contract that best works for a project. So chapter 1 describes the construction industry. Chapter 2, or the construction industry and the types of projects and key players. Chapter 2 was putting them in a chronological order, the project, and all the tasks that are involved. It also distinguished the roles of each participant in each phase. That was chapter 2. So we were talking about subcontractors, contractors. We've kind of learned what the owner does, what the project team does. Now we want to look at some of the risk. So construction projects occur for the purpose of satisfying a particular object, but for each project it carries its own set of additional risks that are based on the aggressive schedule for a particular location or a politically charged environment. Risks come in many forms, a few of which are listed. So there's the work environment. So depending on the country, the location, the neighborhood, regulatory environment, site conditions, economic markets. Risks are categorized in 4 subgroupings. For the first, which one considers the environment in which the project will be built. The more congested and environmentally sensitive the site, the more difficult subsurface conditions are, the higher will be the risk. Inner city locations, soils and hazardous material from prior use, and sites that have an unstable surface. It also could be close to an active neighborhood. Communities can also add a layer of risk, perhaps not immediately. Remote or out of country and work environments can create mobilization risk, and many come with possible political or stabilization. So construction markets and bidding climate should always be evaluated as a risk. Now, I'm going to show you. I hate that we don't have access to it anymore. I might could get with PBS, but PBS did that skyscraper video. And we had access to it. And now Prime has access to it, and we don't. And in our chapter 4, it talks about, going to your library and getting was
You know what it's called?
Yeah, I'm gonna look, because it's on Prime. Let me look on my Prime account.
Because it might be on YouTube, just broken up into smaller.
It did at one time. That's how we got to watch it before. Was based off that it was on YouTube, and I had them all saved to where I could get to them. The next time I went, Amazon had bought out the first series, and the reason I want to talk about it is because the site was the old Madison Gardens site. And when they demoed it, they just pushed it all into a hole and covered it up. So when they got in there starting to do that Worldwide Plaza, it was called Worldwide Plaza. And so you can't, I gotta turn my, it is an excellent thing to watch. It was hilarious too. But they showed what they had to do to dig all that stuff out. So all that stuff had to be relocated. It was downtown Manhattan. It was all the old Hell's Kitchen area. And of course they had, it was hilarious watching some of them older ladies that lived across. They were gonna update their apartments, like their rental, and they were getting into it at some of them meetings that they had. So they had all this stuff they had it all documented for the series. It was done in the 80s, but they had like when they had the town meetings, they had them there, and it was politically charged. Some of them were getting in fights and they were complaining and da-da-da-da, and then finding it was Madison Square Garden, so all the junk that was underneath it they had to bring out. It was so congested to get some of the material there, they would have to coordinate that. It was a big task just to coordinate to get it in there because they had to block off one lane. And then the ladies were mad because when they were doing the blasting to get all that stuff out and subsurface, they were putting maps. They said the rats were coming out of the manholes and everywhere else. But it really was a very good. I would just take the time from school to actually, in a classroom, to play it. I mean, we'd watch all four, it had 4-part series, like maybe 50 minutes each. But once Amazon got so prior to have access, like if I wanted to play it on mine, and I'll tell you what I did. I tried to play it on mine at home and then do collaborate, like so you share my screen, it immediately blacks it out. Because they know I'm going to see what it is. They know you've got a screen sharing device on there, so it immediately stops it. Let me see if I can find out what it is. And I can't expect anybody to do it as, there could be some extra credit if somebody wants to do some extra credit, and I'll get to that in the next chapter if somebody wants to watch the video, and I'm gonna find out what it is right now. And then you'll know. But is just the perfect example of a work environment that has a whole lot of risk. They also had all those underground utilities that they come across, and nobody didn't know who they were. So the water, sewer, all gas, nobody could figure out whose they were, so that held them up a long time. It's just, in the end, it turned out great, but it was a great one to watch. Let's see if I can find out. It's a skyscraper. I should be able to see. It's called PBS series video Skyscraper. One was rock and granite. What any of these? There it is. So it's called Part 1, Paper and Rock. It was a series from 1986. And it's all this has went off because of Amazon having access to it. So school won't let you watch anything, but it was free for Prime. So that is really, see how big it is in here and look at everything else around it. But the people in the neighborhood did not want that there. Even though they were going to upgrade their living, it was hilarious. It was really good video, and kind of showed you what the risks were involved with the neighborhood. and, being in a tight timetable, trying to get the material there, being a dumping ground for the old Madison Square Gardens. It just it was an eye opener. The second would be about if it's technical complex. It's very complex. One of the criteria used to establish the project category is the level of technology employed and some degree of the project's risk level. Projects that deal with known technologies, readily available material, and an average level of finishing carries less risk than those required for unknown technologies or unusual materials. Industrial projects are characterized as high risk than residential. So I would say with them trying to get granite and marble, they had to get that from overseas. I think the steel came out of Texas and they had to ship that by barge. So all of those where you might have some technology or you don't have the material available, the higher the risk is going to be. So that would be an example. So they had a great example of that in there. 3 would be the process. The process that's followed to complete a project can also vary with certain level of risk. To secure the necessary fund in the example, a developer may have to secure 2 or major tenants by a specific date, or a new process facility must meet a certain date to maintain a required level of production or beat competition to the market. Any project that carries a strict funding requirement or a rush timetable will have a high risk. This is because commitments have to be made with incomplete information or some early planning may have to be rushed. Projects with tight timetables are often fast-tracked, forcing someone to prematurely design something, requiring the construction to start using incomplete documents. So tight timetables and funding are what you would say could be some project unknowns can be a risk. Then the owner's organization. So the 4th category of a project risk is the owner's organization. So if they had some past experience and are a committed project team and have good decision makers able to handle that, then the better you are than if they're little past experience and have no in-house construction expertise. That's going to be a major risk. So unfortunately, an owner's organization downsized, facility staffs continue to shrink, placing increased burden on the owner. So to migrate that situation, owners also typically are hiring professional management consultants to provide the leadership. So let's say like the MIT, they hired a construction manager and an architect, and the construction manager had past experience with this type of facility, and so did the architect. So MIT hired both of those to help out ahead of time, because you can have some problems if you don't have that. And like I said, most owners aren't going to have somebody in-house, so normally you're going to have to hire somebody. So with Chapter 2, it describes our fact finding. Here. So I'm right here now. So Chapter 2 describes the large amount of fact-finding work required for the pre-construction stage of a project. So we defined the project requirements or the scope. We understood the nature of the project by scheduling and estimating. This can all be used to accurately picture a risk. So understanding a risk is the first step. The type of organization necessary to manage it and will actually give us an indication of the amount of contingency needed to be built into the budget. Contingency is additional money or time added to a budget or schedule to allow for changes stemming from conditions being different. Typically, and what I'm gonna tell you is around here, we'll do a 20% contingency. So at the end, we may add into our budgets 20%. When we were trying to get some costs for PWC, some in-house projects, or trying to see a fair share, we would put 20, like if we figure out how long we thought it was gonna take and how much it was gonna cost, we'd put a contingency in there, usually 20%. So it's just an additional amount. A level of contingency is a direct measure of the degree of uncertainty on a project. Simply put, the greater uncertainty, the more contingency is necessary. Even if it was just a typical water sewer job that we know how to do and it's not any risk, we still put 20%. Because you've got to budget in for things that you are unforeseen. So a congested building site on a highly complex and technical project, coupled by a short timetable and an unsophisticated owner, will equate to a high-risk project. So a project that's planned for rural on open site, fairly simple, good funding, and a timetable to design build will automatically provide less risk to the owner. So once project risks are understood and identified, as well as sophistication and the capability of the owner, the project team's now ready to move on to assembling a team necessary to deliver the project to the owner. So now we're going to look at, since we just talked about some risks, we're going to talk about the delivery methods. So delivery method is is the approach to organize the project team so to manage their entire design and building process. So the word design build. So we're going to talk about, there are a number of proven strategies that can be used to manage the process, each offering distinct advantages and disadvantages. So the chapter is going to discuss just three most popular approaches: design, bid, build, and construction management. So typically the design, bid, build is the traditional one. So it's the most common. So I think you're going to see something along that lines as a review question or on the final exam. So I'm on page 41. So the first thing is design, bid, build. So it's the traditional one. The owner hires a design professional that prepares a complete set of contract documents for the owner in exchange for a fee. With the complete set of documents, complete set of the contract documents in hand, the owner can either negotiate a fair price for a general contractor or bid out the work. The general contractor is totally responsible for delivering the completed project as spelled out in the contract documents. So an example would be, can I get a question? Okay, I see you, thanks. So what's going to happen with this delivery method? This is the ones mainly around here we use. So for that Decker Heights, I was hired to design it. So I designed it, gave them completely got all the approvals. I worked with an engineer, and we gave him a set of plans. I gave him a list of contractors to contact, call them. I gave him several, gave him that, and he went out and he went to get the bids. And it was about 10 months later, after he had the original documents, that he got a contractor from South Carolina that was going to do the work. So design, once I'm done with it, I'm really through. Once I've designed it, I don't have to get back in, but I did do the surveying, so that was extra, money on that side, but then the contractor is in charge of making sure it gets done to those standards. So this one, would be your traditional one, which is design bid build. So an advantage of this, of the delivery method, is the owner gets a firm fixed price for the project before the work begins. So because the owner receives the complete set of contract documents before negotiating with the bidder for bidding out the work, and that's right. So he took it out and he probably got 10 different people to bid on it. And it was private, so he could choose who he wanted. And he just waited till he got somebody that could do it for about the $80,000 that we were thinking it should cost. So another related advantage to the opportunity is to get price competition from open market. For a good set of contract documents, the owner is able to advertise the job widely. He took it out. He'd go get him some more copies and he'd start carrying them out. And he finally got a good bid that fit with him. The final advantage in this arrangement, the owner does not have to be actively involved on a day-to-day basis once the project enters construction. So wasn't that one of the questions from the last chapter a little bit? The owner doesn't have to be out there when construction goes on, only for specific review points during the course of the project. They do not need a large staff to oversee the project. So that is definitely an advantage too. So what would be a disadvantage? If the owner at some point in the design wants to speed up the completion of the project, it's difficult to change the sequence of work. This is because the project's phased or fast-tracked, or trying to find an alternate way to build it without the builder's involvement during the phase. The arrangement then is in the longest in terms of design and construction time. So it's saying if they want to change it, it's really not, you're not able to change something like this because you've already got a complete set of documents. So that's only, and you get and that's right, he had a bid right up front. He could get a bid from everybody out there. He got competitive bids. So a summary of design bid build. One of the major advantages, the owner knows the cost of the project before construction begins. This is on page 43. The design build contract documents are complete before pricing, assuring maximal completion and a minimum of changes due to incomplete documents. However, the owner gives up contract collaboration during the design phase, which could lead to unnecessary changes during construction or inefficient in a design detail. Projects that are not technically complicated or have been built before are candidates for this kind of arrangement. All right, so we want to look at the next one, which is design build. And design build is something like I was telling y'all that CSI. And they're a design, you'll see a lot of those. They'll say, you see construction going up, look and see if it says something like that, we design build. So they design it and they build it. So it doesn't have to be, the work's done in-house. In this design bid arrangement, the designer and the contractor are either from the same company or through a joint venture. Form a single company for the duration of project. A joint venture is the legal binding of two companies for the purpose of to provide a competitive advantage that would be difficult to attain of loan. I think they had that on one of your review questions. Let me put it online. So I think, so here's one locally. So I just pulled up design build. So it looks like, settled, so here's one. We pride ourselves achieving our client's vision by simple. So this is another design build firm. So in other words, they're doing they do the design work and they do the building work. So you don't get a competitive, and you won't get a competitive edge because you're going to pay them to do it all. So there's quite a few that are done that way, because I see CSI as one that I normally see. And it's construction. Because I'm going to ask you to kind of give me there they are. They're Construction Services, Inc. You'll see them a lot of times. That's got design bid build, but they normally do this design build. It's like design bid build. That's different. So design build is all within one company. So what is one of the advantages, one of the major reasons for choosing design build is to profit from the good communication between the designer and the construction team, because typically they're in-house. So that would be good communications. I would think this was kind of something like they did in the MIT. What would be a disadvantage? Well, I'm not going to specifically say that, because it might be the construction project management was more what they did. So what would be a disadvantage of design build? Although it's possible to give the owner a firm fixed price before the project begins, such a procedure is generally not used in this agreement, since the designer and the builder are hired at the same time before the design has started. You don't get the pricing. You won't get a good fixed pricing unless you have some type of past similar projects have been done. So you don't get an advantage of getting it out there to different people to price, because you're having them build it, because usually design and build is the summary. So a summary on that is the owner gains the benefit of time. So time, if you're in a time crunch, then design build would probably be a good one. The negatives are the total project cost is not generally known before the construction begins, and the owner can easily opt out of decision making, but end up with a project that is not optimal for its use. The design build arrangement makes sense on projects that's highly technical nature, where good communication and coordination needs to occur between the designer and the builders. So this delivery method also allows to fast track and is attractive to industries faced with strong competition and needs to get a new project to the market. So that would be an example for that. So now we want to talk about construction project management. So the owner hires both a design firm and a construction project management firm early in the process, or early in the pre-construction phase of a project. So do you think that's maybe what MIT did? Didn't they hire architects and somebody with some?
They hired an construction manager.
They hired everybody up front. So I know they did, and I'm gonna go over this. I know they hired an architect and they hired somebody that had a lot of expertise with this type of work. So the architect firm and the construction management firm hired by the owner both had expertise with laboratory redesign and construction and had worked on projects at MIT over the years and were familiar with the academic process. In addition, the construction manager also had prior owner project management experience and was able to provide support in handling of the more traditional owner functions, such as a user group interface, furniture inventory, hazard waste, permit applications, and moving coordinating. So I would think maybe the MIT, in my opinion, it doesn't have to be everybody's opinion, that's probably the way they went, was the construction project management, letting them handle that. So the original intent of this delivery method. So delivery methods are how you're going to get the job complete. That's what it's talking about. How are we going to get it complete? Are we going to do a design bid build? Are we going to do design build? Or are we going to do with construction project management? So the original intent of the delivery method was for the owner to hire a construction management firm, which would essentially act as their advisor, with the owner holding all the contracts directly with the subcontractors. So there are some keys to that. So another advantage of this delivery method is that the owner receives the cost benefit of the completion among the subcontractors. In this arrangement, subcontractors are under contract to the owner, so the project gets broken down to 20 like bid package and 5 bids per package. The owner receives the benefit of 100 competitive bidders. So the designer and construction manager review and recommend the contractor, and the owner receives the financial benefit. So what would be a disadvantage? Because all this sounds good, don't it? So what would be a disadvantage? So for the arrangement to work well, you've got to have good communication and cooperation. That's needed to exist among the owner, designer, and construction manager. If any of the players become inflexible, uncooperative, or uncommunicative, the advantage just listed can quickly become a disadvantage. So this delivery method is heavy dependent on the shared mutual respect among the players, respect with all the respect that will be repeatedly tested. So, in summary, the delivery method offers the cost advantage of competitive building to the owner, as well as the opportunity to phase a project. So, fast tracking. So I did talk about fast tracking, and I talked about that in one of the, I think, advantages for design build. So I know I just talked about it, so I'm going to see what page it's on, because we've got it in the sidebar on page 47, but I talked about fast tracking a project, meaning trying to get to the market quicker, and fast tracking usually can be in the design bid. And I know I already said the word a minute ago, but I'm just not seeing what page I talked about fast tracking on. But what is fast tracking? So the normal way to accomplish tasks is to complete each phase, then move to the next. Conceptual planning first, then the design, then procurement, and finally construction. In a fast track, also called phased arrangement, the project is approached in a less than linear fashion. So figure A and B, I don't think I have it in my, I think they miss it. in my, no, that's fine. So they don't even have it in my PowerPoint, so I am gonna talk about it because I'm gonna ask you, we're gonna talk about it later on. So in a fast track approach, the project's broken down in similar pieces called work packages, with each package designed and constructed separately. By breaking the project down, the work can be logically be done first, like site clearing and excavation can be done while the design and some other things are worked in later. So like paving, roofing, finishes, they can still be designed, but in fast track, and we can go ahead and get it cleared, we can go ahead and get some of the dirt moved around, we can do all that while we're still finishing up maybe the building plans. So fast track challenges. A fast track project can clearly save time and money for an owner, but the savings does not continue without a risk. The greater risk stems from the fact that the owner must begin construction without a complete set of plans and a detail and a complete estimate. So if the construction begins and design problems occur on the later stages of the project, then it's going to force our budget to increase. So given the increased risk of fast track approach, one over the traditional method, there should be a reason to proceed, knowing that there are some inevitable compromises and challenges. The reward can be greater, however, in time and cost if it's managed well and aggressively. So contract types. So what is a contract type? So we talked about delivery. Now we're going to talk about contracts. So in addition to choosing delivery method for a project, the owner must also decide what type of contract to use. A contract is simply an agreement between two or more people in which is one person agrees to perform a specific task or provide goods on a service to another in exchange for something in return. So we usually have three different ones that we're going to talk about in this chapter. Single fixed price, and that's a single fixed price contract, is also called a lump sum contract. The contractor agrees to provide a specific amount of work for a specific sum. In this contracting method, both parties try to fix the conditions of the project as precisely as possible. Once the contract is signed, both parties must live with that term. So the advantage of the contract method is that the owner knows before the work begins what the final cost of the project would be. So the risk is that the owner takes in the risk that this owner takes in this contract method is that the agreed to price and schedule is only as good as the accuracy of the contract documents. If the scope of the project changes or if an error exists in the documentation, the terms of the contract will need to be renegotiated, possibly exposing the owner to increased financial risk. Unit price contracts. That's typically what we use here. And usually what I've seen on most bids. Basically, you give us a unit price contract, the owner and contractor agree to a price that will be charged per unit for the major elements. So the owner and designer would typically provide an estimate of quantities for a project, and then ask the contractor to bid the job by calculating unit prices for each item, and then getting the final price. Contractors' overhead profit and other project expenses must be included within the unit price that they provide the owner, and then compared to the final price. And then the lowest bidder usually wins. So they have most of it, if it is a paid with money funds, like utility companies or something that's publicly funded, they have to list those bids where you can get to them. unit price, the only thing I hate about doing, so somebody's gotta give them the quantities. So everybody's bidding apples to apples. Because if you give the contractor the plans, that's usually what I want to say is, here's the plans, you get me your quantities. Because if you're mistaken quantities, or if it changes, and that's a good example, I can tell you 2 good examples on that. If it changes, then they're looking at you because you didn't get some type of quantity right. So 2 things on a subdivision one I had. I showed a fence on my recorded map. It's like a welded wire fence. But on the plans, they weren't on it. They were on the plat because we're required to show it, but they weren't on the plan. And the contractor wanted to be paid to get rid of it. He wanted extra money to dispose of that wire fence. It was just like an old cow fence, just something. It wasn't nothing, they're bulldozing it down, but they wanted extra money to dispose of that. So the owner's like, well, you didn't show it on your plans. Well, it was on the plat. So they should have maybe been shown as demo. I thought he's just gonna pull it down, you know? Second was, for that job had a lot of fill. So dirt was being brought off site. So when they bring the dirt and they scoop it out and put it in the dump trucks, you've got all kinds of voids in there, air. So then when they go to compress it, you're gonna get about 20% less. So I don't know why they don't know this, but maybe you put like, I needed 3 foot of fill for this long, and then I say this is compacted. This is how many quantities I need compacted. Because the owner got charged a lot more based off the dump truck tickets. There was air all in that by the time so they paid for more to compress in. So they were mad about that. All right, the only thing with Decker Heights was PWC's detail showed that you need rock to bed any material. So they have to bring rock in to bed the pipe. But it gives you a generic, you need at least 4 inches and halfway up the pipe. So I just did the width of the base, 8 inches, didn't even take out for the pipe. That's how much quantity of stone. But that's if the bedding material is great. It may need additional, and it did need additional. So they were mad because they had to pay additional rock to come in. But the good thing about that is they didn't have to bring select fill off site. But PWC's detail says we may require extra. So, but they want to hold you to the quantity that you put on there. But if you do unit price, then you just get paid per how many tons, or I had a quantity in there, how many tons they were going to need, but they needed more because the ground wasn't real stable. It was real wet, but they didn't require them to bring material off site. So material off site means, let's say we dig out, and some people didn't want to bid the job for Decker Heights because it was 4 foot off the edge of pavement. They knew all kinds of underground utilities were in, and there's cable, there's telephone, there's all kinds of things that are right off the edge of the pavement. So they knew they weren't going to be able just to go in there and clear. They were have to be really careful about not hitting other, because they'll get charged about. Telephone charged one contractor $6,000. It wasn't shown, locates didn't show it, so they didn't know that where it was on the ground, and they end up hitting it. And we had taken pictures ahead of time. We took pictures of all the, like before construction started, where all the locates, because you gotta call in, it's 1888, I think, or 811, that's it, 811. So for utilities located, it wasn't shown. So when they bored underneath the road, they hit it. So when the telephone company come out, they're like, you just want us to raise it over because it's flexible. They did charge the contractor $6,000. So there's some things you just can't, think of everything. Another thing is like, I didn't have a problem with this, but where I work for always said, just in case you need to get some sold off-site, if you need to haul some in, you need to put a quantity in there so you can get a unit price. Meaning how much, if we need to bring, let's say PwC says, you're not gonna put that soul back in there. We dug it out, we set it to the side, and they say it's way too wet, you're not gonna put it back in there, we're not gonna accept it. You're gonna have to bring dirt off-site from, so you're gonna have to go to one of the bar pits. And Hanson Aggregates, and they have souls up there. You're gonna have to bring it in. Well, that's gonna cost money. Even though technically we think it's good, he would always say, put at least 10 cubic yards. Because if they don't need it, you're okay, because they won't get charged for it. But if they do need it, then you've got a unit price. Because if not, then they can make up whatever price they want if it comes up. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So they say, go ahead and put a quantity for anything coming, if you need dirt off-site. Just put 10 cubic yards so we can get a price. So they can tell me it's gonna be $100 a cubic yard. And then if we don't need it, you don't have to worry about it. So unit price are the ones that mostly we use around here and we'll be looking at. That's the more expensive where you break it down per workable unit, like a manhole or pipe or, bedding material. We can figure out what it would cost per unit. So the contractor's overhead and profit goes into their unit prices as well. So we used to keep a log. So whenever we would get bids in for a job, small or big, we would put the updated cost into an Excel so that would help us with our fair share costs. So unit price are the ones, in some projects like heavy engineering is a good example. It's difficult to accurately get the quantities of work necessary. So in excavation work, different types of material often encountered. Rock versus earth must be excavated. To eliminate a risk to the owner and the bidder, the designer will usually estimate quantities, then ask the bidders to provide a unit price for each type of excavation and bid the job. So accurate payment will be made on the basis of multiplying the actual quantities excavated by a unit price. So some of it changed, and what they're going to say, the risk to the owner is this contract method is if its estimated quantities are significantly different from the reality of the situation. So the financial commitment of the owner will be maybe greater than planned. Mistaken estimates expose the owner to what is called an unbalanced bid, increasing the project's cost to the owner. So of note, in the fact that significantly unbalanced bids are considered unethical today. In some cases, they can be rejected or the unbalanced work will be deleted by change order. In the contracted method, actual quantities must be measured in the field regarding the owner's presence on site to work with the contractors. Delivery tickets and other invoices must be checked and validated. Final contract price is not known until the last item of work was measured and invoiced with the contractor. So let's say they didn't finish it up in a month. Then typically what they'll do is they'll send their invoice into the owner to get paid. So somebody's got to figure out how much got put in that month. Typically we would know if it was one of our projects because we know how much we got already staked. But you would do this once a month. So there, you've got to, I guess when I went into business for myself, then that's when, I missed showing that welded wire fence, it was gonna cost him. I don't know how much it was, but it was enough for him to say, hey, you didn't show this on your plans and they want da-da-da-da more money to do it. Well, here's my thought. They out there and bid on it. They're gonna clear and excavate it. To me, that comes into clearing. That's just as much on the contractor as it was for me to show it on my plans. I had it on my site plan. We can't, and then actually they did the dump truck, so that was another one that was more, than what they thought. You kinda need to put something in your notes saying, hey, these are just the estimated quantities, depending on subsurface conditions, because it may be more. So that's unit price. That's typically what we use around here. Then there is the third factor, which is a cost plus fee. And I know I'm trying to scoot through this because I don't have much, and will be through for today. Cost plus fee. In a cost plus fee contract arrangement, also called reimbursable or a time and materials contract, the contractor and usually a designer work on a project and it's reimbursed by the owner for costs plus a fee paid either to additional agreed upon fee or paid to a fee that a percentage of the cost. It's important that the owner spell out clearly in advance what the costs will be reimbursed and which costs are to be covered by the fee. The contract makes sense when the scope of the project is difficult to define or when it's important to fast track. A variation of this type of contract is called Guaranteed Maximum Price, GMP. In this type of contract, the contractor is reimbursed at a cost and agreed upon fee up to that GMP, which is your maximum price, which is essentially a cap. It's essentially a cap. Beyond the point, the contractor is responsible for covering any additional costs within the original scope, project scope. It's not unusual to include in this contract an incentive clause, which specifies the contractor will receive additional profit bringing that project under that GMP. So by using GMP, the project cost can be capped, but the quality and scope may be sacrificed. So in other words, they may try to skimp out on quality or scope, trying to come under that fee. So that's a disadvantage. Either by the contractor or the assumption turned out to be wrong by the owner when the final design is significantly different than the documented on which the GMP was built. Without sacrificing the scope and quality, the cost and schedule may increase, such that a builder can reasonably price the work. The use of a GMP with the adequate design just postpones an inevitable confrontation and adds another sort of risk. This type of contractor requires a reputable contractor, construction manager, since tremendous trust will be placed with this participant. So when can we make, and this will be the end, a contract change?
When something unforeseen comes up,
Yeah.
that's not in contract.
Yep. So because of the change in the owner requirements or scope, because conditions are unforeseen as the time the contract is signed and the work must be performed differently, due to an omission or a detail feature that can't be built as specified, then the design must be adjusted. The impact that changes has on contract depends on the type of contract that is in place and the reason for the change. A cost plus contract can accommodate all three contingencies without a change in the contract except the variation of a GMP. If a GMP is in place, it may have to be increased or decreased depending on the terms of the GMP clause between the owner and the contractor. In the case of a fixed price contract, all three of the preceding reasons will probably lead to a change in contract between the parties. All three contingencies generally lead to increased or decreased cost and time, which needs to be fairly adjusted. Questions? So that'll get us through the first section of the textbook. All right. So review questions 3, we'll talk about next Wednesday. Remember, Monday's a holiday. We'll start working on next week when you get back in chapter 3, exercise 1 and 2. And then we'll do example 3. And then I'll work with you on doing some chapter 3 examples. So we'll be doing some kind of where I'll give you some guidance and give you some ideas, and then you'll pull them up on your own. So I'm not going to give you anything to have to do over the holiday break. When you get back, we'll work on some of this before I start making chapter 4 review questions. So we'll have about 2 weeks before we're going to chapter 4. And most of this is just going to be things that we can get offline, or that these were certain criteria that are part of the chapter 1 and 2. I put them together because it's wanting you to it's going to ask for a delivery option in a contract, what you think's best, or what do you think that they should choose. So I'll talk about that when you get back from your break. Any questions for me? Everything's open if anybody wants to work ahead, but I'll start talking about this next Wednesday. Let me look. Break time. So we'll spend a little bit of time in 3, and then we'll move on to 4. Has everybody been able to download Word and Excel? Because we are going to do some Excel exercises. We'll do it in class, so if you're in here, there's no need to have it, but we're going to be working some stuff in Excel. All right, so I'm going to stop recording, but I'm going to leave the book open, leave the